Welcome to Get Psyched, the two-part special event celebrating the return of Psych. I am your MC for the evening, Pineapple Cal, and we've assembled a great panel to talk about some of the greatest top fives of the show Psych. So first, I have my two good friends from Nerd to My Geek, Mr. Joe Davis and Mrs. Ashley Davis.
It's Geek to My Nerd.
I've heard it both ways. Also, we have someone that, you know, when you order food and you wait for it, someone shows up, but it's not the delivery guy. You get Mr. Joe Chendengo.
Wait for it. Hey, how you doing, guys?
So we were really excited to do this because all of us being huge Psych fans. You guys want to talk about, I guess, Joe and Ash, you guys want to talk about how this idea came about?
We were in Philadelphia, which is where we met Joe.
Right.
We were chilling and talking, and I think it was like Saturday night we were talking about like shows we loved and just in general crap we love, the stuff that you do when you meet people and talk to people for the first time or the 37th time or the 100th time or, you know,
just
that kind of stuff. Times. And it came up that we all deeply love Psych, like deeply love Psych.
It's one of those shows where I think when you find someone that's like, I like Psych, and then you're like, oh, you do? So then you start rambling off all this stuff. And most of the time we're like, no, I watch it. But everyone, we were like just referencing it, talking about every show we love. And, you know, and then we've, you know, all talked since then. And then since they were coming out with the movie, we were like, let's, you know, put together a little series and get this thing rolling. And really, I mean, I think this show and this episode is just going to be about all of our love and appreciation of this show and one of the most underrated shows, comedies of all time.
From like the golden age of USA programming.
Definitely, because this came out after
Monk and Burn Notice.
I don't remember if it came out after Burn Notice, but
it was between Burn Notice.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the name of the show that came out before Monk that had Anthony Michael Hall in it. Dead Zone. So that kind of started the whole golden age, and then I think Monk really launched it, and then Psych just started off with one of the strongest pilot episodes I've ever seen in a television show. Just like I was hooked immediately. Like I have got to see more of this show, and one that I stuck through to the, you know, not the bitter end, but just the, you know, the end. I was sad to see it go, but they had, you know, kind of run it their course as well with the, you know, the conceit of the show. But I thoroughly enjoyed watching that series. Love rewatching it. It's a really fun show.
Well, I gotta ask, did you guys start watching it from the beginning, or like I know Ashley, you said you did from the pilot. I know myself, like I had seen a few episodes, and then I was actually on a vacation in Florida, and we went to a Target, and this is like when the days like, you know, like Target sold, like you buy like 2 quality DVD like seasons, and it would be like $15. And I was like, I kind of remember Psych. We don't have cable, and I was just with my parents. And I instantly hooked. I had like these 2 seasons, and I just binged them through. And I think Psych may have been at like season 3 or 4 at that time. And since then, I mean, it's like, you know, you truly like are a psycho. And
well, like Ashley was saying, like when they started that whole characters welcome thing, I watched Monk right from the beginning. The pilot episode, the 2-hour movie that they had, like it was like a double episode. And then, like when they were they were kind of like having commercials for Psych during that. Like, I mean, like after several seasons into Monk, they had the commercials for where Psych was premiering, and you know, it was one of those character welcome thing. And I think they had a commercial where they had like Gus and Sean like doing their little bit, like trying to promote the show. And I was hooked from that, and that's when I watched the 2-hour movie for that as well, the premiere, the pilot episode that Ashley was talking about, and I fell in love with it right away as well. And then I was quite shocked to see, like, because I think they waited like maybe a little bit to have the actual first ever episode after that, because they switched the detective that was with Lassiter.
Well, they didn't really switch as so much like organic movement of what would have happened if what Sean found out was actually uncovered.
Yeah.
Right.
And I see, and this ties right into, I see in the chat, Kimber mentioned why the pineapple.
Mm.
In the pilot, James Roday, who plays Sean, literally just improv'd about pineapples in one of the scenes, and then it stuck, and then they hit a pineapple in every single episode.
And they talked about pineapples about once an episode or reference them or something similar. But yes, every episode of Psych has
And it deeply angers me that people relate more pineapples and things to How I Met Your Mother than they do Psych.
Well, I've never watched that, so I don't.
I just think Kimber's saying about it, and I've heard it before, and I'm like, no, that's Psych's icon.
I think statistically more people have seen How I Met Your Mother.
Probably.
So it makes...
Well, that's why. It makes so much sense.
That show is wildly more popular than our little show, but I'm so excited to see the movie. I have kind of been avoiding watching all the promos for it because I just want to go in blind. So I'm super excited for it.
Yep.
And hence my name too, Pineapple Cow. It works.
But we don't know who this gentleman in the red blazer is because his lower third vanished.
Oh,
Did I? Do you want me to take it off?
No, the lower third. He's saying.
Lower third.
Oh, my lower third. Oh.
So Josie, do you want to talk about what we're doing in the part one of our special, 2-part special?
Yes. So our first top, actually, Cal, I'm sorry. What was the order of that again?
Well, no. Well, we're actually going to talk about what.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
what we're doing.
I can run this down. My bad. So we are going to go through our top 5 moments. Gus has a nickname. Top 5 episodes. Top 5 culture references. And top 5 guest stars. And really, we're just going to go through and discuss, and hopefully just we're going to have a nice organic conversation about each. Mm-hmm. So Cal, if you wouldn't mind.
So here's the little rundown of what we're going to have today. Josie was nice enough to make this image for us. It's a great job. All the images you see today, Josie worked on and did a great job doing all of them. So we thank him for all the work he put into this.
Thank you. So
the first thing we're going to be talking about is our top 5 Gus nicknames. So, Gus being Sean's best friend since childhood, they have a great relationship dynamic, and it shows throughout the entire series. But one of the best things that trigger are the nicknames that we have for him. So we're going to start with Ashley and go through her top 5 Gus nicknames.
All right. So I'm going to start off with mine. I guess start off with number 5 and then work up to 1. I don't remember how we were doing this, even though we just had this conversation. My number 5, and it was so hard because there's so many great Gus nicknames. If you go online, you can Google like cuts of all of the names that he's ever had. But in one of the greatest episodes, Dual Spires from season 5, Sean introduces Gus as Lodge Blackman, which is a reference to the Twin Peaks Black Lodge. And I just thought that was a very creative name, and it's funny, and it's just overall it's a great episode.
So, can you explain to me the reference of Lodge Blackman not being a Twin Peaks fan?
So, in Twin Peaks, it's a very mystical show. There's a lot of supernatural elements, and there's an entity known as the Black Lodge, which has to do with evil. Okay. And so there's also a White Lodge, so it's kind of like a yin and yang situation going on.
A little Ali Sheedy for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. No. All right. Cool. Yeah. Because I always notice with the nicknames, sometimes they are pulling from a very specific space that's from the scene.
Yep.
So that would make total sense.
Totally.
Sometimes you get 5 in an episode.
True.
So you want to do the rest of yours?
Do it. Yeah. So I don't remember if we're just going through all of them.
Yep. Ashley, do all of them, and then go to Joe, and then Joe.
Awesome. So my number 4 comes from Zero to Murder in 60 Seconds. And I can't remember all of the exact details of that episode off the top of my head, but I just really love the whole pun of like Ovaltine Jenkins, because, you know, Ovaltine is a drink, and Jenkins is like it just sounds like a funny name. And I can't remember Gus's reaction to it, because sometimes Gus will have a bad reaction to the names, but I think he actually liked this one, if I'm recalling the episode correctly, and it just flows really well. I always like the names that have multiple syllables to them, because they just sound funnier. And then my number 3, I really love this one, from Romeo and Juliet and Juliet. He calls Gus John Jacob Jingly Smith, and they're talking to the potential client. And he's like, "Are you saying your name is John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt?" And Sean is like, "Yes, we used to share the name, but I had to change it because every time I go out, all the shouting," and just like that whole reference to that little song I just die laughing every time, because I just think that is hilarious. My number 2 nickname comes from the episode The Old and the Restless, a pun on The Young and the Restless. Sean and Gus are impersonating hospital employees, and the only costume that Gus could find was a candy striper one. And so Sean says, "And this is my personal candy striper knick-knack." And he's like, "Hello, he is from Guam." And it's just adorable. Like, I just love again, multiple multiple syllable nicknames are always the best for me.
Especially with the hard consonants.
Yes, hard consonants are, if you know anything about, the psychology of comedy, that's definitely in all the books. And then my number 1 all-time favorite, I do this impression all the time in my own life, is when Sean introduces Gus as MC Clap Your Hands, and he goes,
I have this number 1.
I do that all the time. Clap your hands. I'm very simple, you'll find out.
And Gus has his smooth face while doing it.
It's awesome.
I have the same number 1.
Sorry, I was going to say, talk about smooth transitions. We go from Ashley to Joe Davis.
Yeah, to Davis. To the other Davis in the room. So Ashley already talked about Knick-Knack, but I also really enjoyed that one because it's one of the handful of ones that Gus just embraces fully. Because half the time, Gus gets really upset when he has a nickname. The other half, he doesn't. I like Scrooge Jones because it sounds like if Gus was a Christmas action star. For my number 4. And then my number 3 was Ron Davis, because how can I not go with the Davis? And then number 2, I chose Magic Head. Because it's Magic Head. It's one of the handful of ones he gets brought up multiple times. And it's, it's a superhero name. So, And then finally, Ashley's number 5 is my number 1, Lodge Blackman, because it is such a deep pull. My strongest ones are incredibly, they try to be deep pulls because I just really enjoy them. So, yeah.
All right. So we go to Joe C after this.
Hello. So my number 5, and I'm actually going to pull an audible real fast. I put Santonio Holmes just because he's a Jets wide receiver, and he just calls him that in one episode, and I always think of it. Or a former Jets wide receiver. He's actually a huge asshole. But I'm a big Jets fan, so that's why I like that one. But another one I really want to call out, and it's actually a tandem of Evan Sean and Gus, is Sukan Sam and Satchmo Gizmo when they share the beard. Because it's hysterical. It's in a later episode. My number 4 is also Magic Head. I do like how you said, has this superhero aspect of it. And also Magic Head also reminds me of his Super Sniffer, for some reason, his Super Sniffer powers. And then Jazz Hands, just because, I don't know, it's something funny to me about Jazz Hands. This is my associate, Jazz Hands. And my number 2 is actually from the name of an episode, Black and Tan, A Crime of Passion, I believe it's called. And Gus is tan and Sean is black, and they keep getting confused. And they're like, well, that's racist to assume he's black. This is my associate Tan Tangus. So It's hysterical. And then I fully agree with you, Ashley. Number one is MC clap your hands. So the nicknames are endless, and I probably think if we just keep talking, we'll probably think of like 20 more just to throw in there.
Yeah, there's like one like Scooney U-turn Singleton that I really like. We were watching one of the episodes. It's like, man, I forgot about that one. Or I was watching one of the super cuts of all the nicknames, and I can't remember the episode, but they're talking to a prisoner, and Sean, and this is my partner, Burton Guster. It's like, why did you use my name
of all the times?
Of all the times, why?
With all the people.
So Cal, what is your top 5?
So for me, I have a bunch that you guys already said, but number 5 was Magic Head from like the comic book episode when they go to Comic-Con. Number 4 was from the military one that featured John Cena. And John Cena actually gave him the name Guy Buttersnaps because he was one-upping Sean for everything Sean did. He was kind of like one-upping him, so he actually gave he gave Gus a nickname, and it was Guy Buttersnaps. For number 3, it was the episode where they went like, it was the time travel one. I forgot what it was called. Disco Wasn't Dead, it was Murdered, I think it was called. Yeah. And Sean's dad, Henry, actually gave Gus the name because it's always like Sean giving the nickname, but this is when like Henry was trying to butt in the investigation, and he's like, "Oh yeah, this is my son Sean, and this is his partner Methuselah Honeysuckle." And it was so funny. It's just a random nickname, and it's so funny how he gave it to him.
That's a great episode.
In the Shabby episode, so where the seal dies, he gives him the nickname Hummingbird Saltamachia, and that was just such a random name, so I loved it. It was so funny. And then for number 1, I also had Lodge Blackman. Being a huge Twin Peaks fan, I loved the fact that they that was just a great name to like Joe Davis said, it draws deep from that the show's mythos. So I liked it a lot.
Yeah, it's just pretty fantastic, and the Gus nicknames in general are always a lot of fun.
Yeah, because sometimes he'll embrace them, and sometimes it's like, Sean, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Do you think that he comes up with those names like on the spot? Or I mean, I'm sure some of them are script, but some of them maybe he like just improvs them or like ad libs them, and they might be used.
Cal, I'm pretty sure, like looking up some earlier, like just doing some research on some like facts and things like that, or the first nicknaming of it was improv, just kind of like the pineapple.
So then they just ran with it for their writing styles and stuff.
So I'm sure it was written, but I'm sure some were still improv.
So I wonder if it's when they were doing the script writing, they did a insert nickname here and just kind of let them run with it on the script on the set.
Yeah, because that's definitely something that like it sounds weird. Like I at least at first, like I don't think you could like plan out and have it just be working effectively if like Sean and Gus or James Roday, I should say, and Dule Hill probably have the best chemistry on TV, or had the best chemistry on TV for me in a partnership. And I think that has a lot to do with it. Like they play off each other so well, and those names definitely come up because James Roday is pretty quick, even in if you listen to any of his interviews. I mean, he's not Sean, but he could move that fast, and I believe that's how he got the job.
And isn't he related to like he really is related to like Emilio Estevez, right? There's like some distant relationship, and
Estevez,
that's why when
Estevez.
Yes, that's why he used that name. Like he's like, I'm Emilio Estevez.
Oh, I
pick your name.
I have no idea. I know he's part Mexican.
No, yeah, no, it's James Rodriguez, or like as you would say, James Rodriguez is his real name, but like he is. I think he is related to Emilio Estevez in real life, like true story.
Ooh, Estevez.
Yeah. Apparently, James Roday actually dated Maggie Lawson at one point.
Yes, they were together. They were together. That's how they met, and they're together until they broke up, like in the last season, I think it was.
Wow, that's poignant.
It breaks my heart.
Yep, that broke my heart.
So before the show had ended, and I was like, they're dating, and someone said to me, it was like one of my girlfriend's friends. They were like, "Oh, it's a sham for the show," and I'm like, "No, it's not."
You shut your mouth.
And then the show ends, and actually, I don't know why I know this. She and they all seem to be get along, and all this. But she actually married the guy who was on her next show. Yeah. So she got a pilot called it was something with baseball. I kind of forget the name. It had like maybe like 8 episodes or so. It wasn't actually that bad. But she left Psych in season 8. You could tell to start filming that, and I believe she ended up marrying the
producers.
Her lead,
something,
I think it was her co-star on that show.
Oh, I thought it was but like you could see it at the reunion special because like they weren't even sitting next to each other or anything like that. It was like they barely had any like interaction with each other at their special. So that kind of I saw it there and I'm like, oh, this kind of sucks, man. This is
so not to give any spoiler ahead because I think they're probably both very professional in the sense of I hope in the movie that they still have them together.
I don't know if you know what the headline was for it, but I think I know what happens.
Yeah.
So should we go into our next topic of cameos?
Before we move on to that, I did see a list, I think on the USA Network site, because they still have like a section for Psych. I don't know if they have it just because the movie's coming out, but they had a list of unused Gus nicknames. And the only one that I could remember that they kind of had it in the show, but it was in a different form was one was like Dr. T and the Women, like in a reference to that movie called Dr. T and the Women. And I think like somebody had like it's kind of used in that context, but not like the full form of the title. And I forgot what the other ones were, but that one really stood out to me. It's like, I thought I heard that one, but maybe it just wasn't the full one, but you could go look that up online later. It's a fun little list of ones they didn't use for whatever reason.
And the Psych Wikia has a list of every single nickname Sean has used through every season, and it mentions what episode it is and what nicknames he used in that episode. So check that out on the Psych Wikia too, because it's really good.
Yeah. If you want to do a little deep dive. So how I compiled this list.
Yeah.
So our next topic is our top 5 guests and cameos. And I'm going to kick this one off. We have at number 5, Dion Richmond, who's actually Bud from The Cosby Show. A running gag throughout the series of Psych was people on the show, on the actual show, were like, aren't you Bud from The Cosby Show? To Gus. They would always say that to Gus, like, aren't you Bud from The Cosby Show? That happened several times throughout the series. So in the series finale, they actually got Dion Richmond, who played Bud on The Cosby Show, to appear as Gus's like manager or boss. And, they're interacting the entire episode. And it's hilarious to see because that was a running gag all throughout the show. Number 4, for high top. Yep.
Kyle, can I interject just with Dion Richmond? Because I think it might be one of the only times it might come up. Is another really fun fact about that is Gus's mother is played by Mrs. Huxtable. So Bud's mom on The Cosby Show plays Gus's mom in Psych.
Yeah, anyway, she did play Gus's mom, and it was funny. They did change the father though after one episode. That kind of sucked.
Oh yeah, I mean it was Keith David at first, and he's great.
It was then Ernie Hudson was it after, right, or the other way around?
Hudson first, and then David in the next one.
Yeah.
They got really good actors for both. I'm sorry to derail you there, but I thought that was just too interesting to pass
for number 4, I had actually a duo because there was a trio in this episode, and that was for the High Top Fade Out episode where Jaleel White and Kenan Thompson played the other members of their Black Capella group. It's called Black Capella, but when Sean joined it, he decided to rename it Quarter Black, which makes no sense because 3 of them are black and 1 of them is white. So that was a funny thing about it. And Gus brought that up, and he's like, that doesn't make any sense. For number 3, I had John Cena. I'm a huge wrestling fan. I'm not a fan of John Cena, but he does a great job because he's on several episodes of Psych, and he does a great job every episode he's on. So John Cena is a good guest star on Psych.
Doesn't he play Juliet's brother?
Yeah, he plays Juliet's brother, and I'm pretty sure one of you guys probably have who plays her father as one of your top 5 cameos, possibly. I'm not sure. For number 2, I'd be definitely remiss if I didn't mention the Twin Peaks cast. Because I'm a huge Twin Peaks fan, like I said, and the Dual Spire episode had a lot of characters. And when we talk about the discussion part, we can talk about the Ray Wise special thing that we were talking about earlier. But they had like Sherilyn Fenn. They had I can't remember the name. The guy who played Bobby Briggs. They had who played what's her name? God, the main person.
Laura Palmer.
Laura Palmer. Yeah, Laura Palmer. They had even a small character that played the redhead girl who was like very seductive in Twin Peaks.
Yeah,
They had her on it as well. Laura Budding Milford or whatever her name was. Lana Budding Milford, I think it was. She was in this as well. So they had a bunch of people. So it was pretty cool to see. And then of course Carrie Elwes. I guess that's how you say his name, right? Elwes. Or is it Yules? I'm not sure. But I never knew how to say his name. But Carrie Elwes was in it, and he plays Pierre Despereaux, or as Sean would say, who's Pierre Despereaux? He's like, what do you mean? And like Lasser corrects him, but like he's on several episodes and he does a great job. But he does play more than that. He plays like Finn Borgenson or whatever his name is, or later on. So yeah, he did a great job through all his episodes.
Carrie Ellis has a great character in the show, and probably one of the top like special recurring guest character arcs next to one other. And I think he fits in really well on that show.
He was awesome at it.
And you know, and I mean, the first episode he appears in, they're in Canada, and so Psych films in Canada and Vancouver. And in that episode, there's so many like little in jokes about being in Vancouver.
Yep.
Instead of Santa Barbara, because like I mean, I've never been to California, but I'm told like Santa Barbara and Psych looks nothing like Santa Barbara. And it just looks like in Vancouver. So there's so many little in jokes, and Carrie Elwes is just such a great addition.
All right, so I'm gonna go to you now, Joe.
Oh,
Josie.
Yes. All right, so my first is Val Kilmer, and Val Kilmer actually pops up at the end of the series, in the series finale. There's a character that we don't see throughout the 8-year run called Dobson that Lasseter just refers to. Like, Dobson, get that. Dobson will take care of it, and it sounds like Lasseter's like go-to guy. You never see him. Turns out Val Kilmer has been in the office the whole time. Side note that episode also, he doesn't make my list, but it also has Billy Zane, and Billy, who's the villain in that episode, and Billy Zane only agreed to it because someone told him Psych had referenced him more than anything else has in like the history. My next is Ralph Macchio, and he's just really great cameo. He plays a very like down on his luck police academy the teacher. I just enjoy Ralph Macchio popping up in things. It works. And then
wasn't he in 2 episodes? Because they made fun of the My Cousin Vinny one too, where he was a lawyer.
Oh, he was the lawyer, and actually, now that you bring it up, Cal, so Psych holds the distinct record distinct place in history of remaking their own episode. Mm-hmm. They're only show to remake their own episode. And you're right, Ralph Macchio played the lawyer in that episode. That was in our last episode, so they like really they brought back a lot of people that were loved just to get it in the last season. My next is Ali Sheedy as Mr. Yang, or part of Mr. Yang, and that whole series is just one of my favorites in the show. The Yin Yang trilogy. She's just great. She does some pretty good acting in the show, and I think brings like this weird, creepy menace, and her interactions with Sean are just great.
Yeah, and the way that they play off of each other in the different episodes in the trilogy, like when she's in the special like psych ward that they have her in because she has to be not surrounded by colors because it's overstimulating, and when she's asking about the book, and or like when they have to confront each other in the car, and like the other part of the trilogy, it's just like so menacing, and I think it was an excellent casting choice.
Yeah, it's probably, even though it's not number one, it's probably my like just favorite one of my favorite players that shows up. So my next would be Freddie Prinze Jr. As Dennis, and it's an episode called Not Even Close Encounters, and the episode itself is all right. It's about it's like they deal with like some sort of alien abduction, and they go to their friend, and like their friend is Freddie Prinze Jr., who has he used to be this like fat, like dopey kid who got bullied and this and that, and then he grew up to be Freddie Prinze Jr. And I think it's just really funny, like especially like you know, knowing now that like he's also a huge nerd in real life, Freddie Prinze Jr., he plays a huge nerd in this, and he has like this secret spy layer, but his wife's smoking hot, so he's afraid to tell her that like
hyper geeky.
Yeah, that he's hyper geeky and that he loves cons, and he has all these crazy expensive memorabilia, and he has this little nice like arc in the episode, and I think he fits in well. They didn't try to do too much with him, and you'll notice there's this relation with Freddie Prinze Jr. and Dule Hill, where they get a lot of the characters or actors, I should say, who are in She's All That, because Dule Hill was in She's All That. And my number one is Tim Curry as Nigel St. Nigel. And this was American Duos at the end of episode 1, or I mean, season 1.
Yeah, this is the season 2 premiere episode.
And that to me, with Tim Curry, is really when like they like came their own. They let loose, and they let with this like cultural like pizzazz. And Tim Curry plays basically a Simon Cowell in a singing competition, and it's hysterical. He's great in it. He also gives us something that sticks with us for the whole series, and it's calling Dule Hill's car a blueberry. I'm stuck in a blueberry, and it's great. He's great in the episode, and it's unfortunately probably one of the last times we'll see Tim Curry.
It's also really great that he's one of the only characters that can completely frazzle Sean's dad, because it's hilarious.
We did have the raspberry for one episode too. Don't forget, for part of an episode.
Well, we did, and it's funny, the blueberry, because I've looked into it. It's a Canadian model car because they're from filming in Canada. You can't find it in America.
Oh no! So our dreams of getting the same car are now crushed. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
I think that would be a good road trip car.
I believe you could get
to my nerd channel.
I believe you could get close to it. But that's so yeah, that's my list.
Wow, so we didn't even have any crossovers. So that's pretty good. So I'm gonna move to Joe now. Let's see if we have any. Oh yeah, we do.
All right, so my number 5 is Jimmy Simpson, who plays a somewhat recurring character. He's only in like 2 episodes, I think. Mary Lightly. He is a guy who is obsessed with the yin yang killer, and which Ali Sheedy is one half of that whole situation. He ends up like being they end up thinking he's the killer. He ends up dying in one episode. It's just a really fun character because he is that super hyper weirdly awkward type person that you just don't get why he's the way he is. Like he's the kind of guy that will just dig his hands into a pie, just a whole pie, just to get like a little piece of paper. Tim Curry, as mentioned earlier, Nigel St. Nigel is my number 4. Yeah, I also really enjoy it because it's Tim Curry. I mean, it's hard to go wrong with Tim Curry. Jane Lynch as the intern chief Vix. I think still intern chief. Interim chief Vix. Sister. The character name is Commander Barbara Dunlap. So Chief Vic is the chief of the Santa Barbara Police Department, and her sister, Commander Dunlap, is the like commander of the Coast Guard in the area or something like that. So there's always this fun little like rivalry between the two of them, and it's absolutely hilarious watching them work off each other. Cary Elwes is Pierre Despereaux because he's kind of like the gentleman thief type character, and that's a lot of fun. And then my number 1 is, this one's really special to me, is Ray Wise in the episode Dual Spires, specifically because he's in 2 episodes as the same character as Father Peter Wesley. He is the head pastor, the head priest at Gus's church. And it's really funny because when they're dealing with some like letter they find in the episode of Dual Spires, it's in Latin, and the only person they know that speaks Latin is his father Wesley. So they contact him, and he ends up showing up in the episode, and they make a joke about his hair being white because it happens in Twin Peaks. And it's just such a deep pull that they brought this character back who was in Twin Peaks, but he was in a previous episode, not a Twin Peaks related episode, for this. I love that pull so much.
Well, are you getting pickup now?
I'm getting echo from you.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know what. Sorry about that. We're good. Oh, we're good now.
Yep.
So like, I was going to say is, I think Jane Lynch is a standout cameo though. And then the one that would compare with her, it just made me think of it, is when Gary Cole shows up.
Yes.
So sorry that I just wanted to interject on that. Well, honorable mention.
I'm gonna go to Ashley's now.
All right. Speaking of Gary Cole, he's my number 5. He is in season 3 episode Gus Walks Into a Bank, where Gus is held hostage in a bank along with some other people. And he's actually held hostage by the actor who plays Cameron from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And so because it's a hostage situation, they need to call in the hostage negotiator. And this is probably one of the best entrances of a character in the series, where they're playing more human than human, and like the doors to the back of the SWAT car like fly open, and Gary Cole like jumps down, he puts on his sunglasses, and
it's all in slow-mo.
Yeah, it's just so awesome, and his character is very precise, and Sean has to kind of, as Sean often has to do in the show, manipulate his way into like getting Gary Cole's character to do what he needs him to do.
I'm trying to blank here. Where's Gary Cole from? Sorry.
Gary Cole is a big 80s actor, and he was also Lumbergh in Office Space. That's probably one of his most notable roles, is that character. So he's always playing like kind of mean type of people.
I'm sorry. I always will also remember him as Harvey Birdman, attorney at law, because he's the voice of Harvey Birdman.
Is he? I know why I thought of him, and I'm sorry I ruined your number 5 for you. Is as Reese Bobby and Ricky Bobby, who plays the the counterpart to Jane Lynch.
Yep.
So,
and then his character name is Commander Cameron Luntz, and just like that's just like a negative sounding name, and he's also dating Juliet, which Sean, as we mentioned earlier, he has always had a thing for her ever since the 2nd episode. My 4th one was also Ralph Macchio's character. I just love that episode with the whole we'd like to thank the Academy about the police academy, and like everyone's so mean to him, if I remember correctly. It's just like a fun little one. My number 3 is Kerry Washington as Gus's ex-wife Mira in There's Something About Mira, and like the way the episode starts is hilarious. Like Sean and Gus realize somebody is following them, and it's this really bad private detective. And then he keeps saying like, "Oh yeah, I'm looking for these things." It's like, "Well, you keep getting all this wrong." And then like Gus is like, "No, like I actually was married." And Sean's like, "How dare you never tell me that you were married?" And of course, the reason why it was supposed to be annulled. And Gus is a very straight-laced character, and Mira is a total wild party girl. They met at, I think, like in Jamaica or something.
Do Goldschlager.
Yes, and she does this really cool trick where like she like does like a little dragon thing where she gets some alcohol and like does like a little like thing with fire. And like the way we see Gus in this episode, when they met, like she's wearing like a bikini and he's wearing an Argyle sweater vest, and he just looks so dorky, and he has like a high top and just very 90s looking, and she's just very wild. And the whole episode, Gus thinks that she's trying to trick him into remarrying her, and it's a whole thing. But she's very sweet, and just like to see like Kerry Washington like play like this like wild party girl character is just really awesome, and I just love that episode. My number 2 is George Takei playing a fictionalized version of himself in Sean versus the Red Phantom, where there's a missing persons case, and they figured out that this person went to the Comic-Con, or it's called like Tricon in Santa Barbara. And so Sean and Gus pretend to be Takei's like personal assistant, so that they don't have to pay to get into the con because it's sold out, and they need to figure out where this boy is. And it's just really hilarious because like Takei confronts them, and they're like, don't you remember from San Antonio, or it's some other con where something bad happened? And there's this really hilarious bit when it's like, well, where are the blueberries? What do you mean you didn't get the blueberries? And then George is talking about like, I can tell the difference. These are Michigan blueberries. I specifically wanted North Carolina blueberries. I can tell they're different. And it's just like all the little hilarious things of him being like a total diva, and Sean and Gus are trying to like solve the crime, but also help him out. And they make like a fake other assistant so they can start blaming her for everything, so that Gus doesn't have to take the blame.
Because Gus is a huge geeky Star Trek fan and all that jazz.
And so it's a great episode, a great cameo, and I just love it when celebrities can make fun of themselves, because oftentimes they're not like that.
Oh, you never get Shatner on that episode.
I
said you would never get Shatner on that episode.
No, of course, but Shatner does play. He's actually plays Juliet's dad in a couple of episodes, but definitely is a character. And then, like mentioned before, Tim Curry as Nigel St. Nigel is my number 1. Just so fun to see him playing such a horribly mean character in the vein of Simon Cowell, like you said before.
Yes, so we had a lot of good ones from. I was surprised no one chose William Shatner. I was expecting to see William Shatner on the list, but Joe just brought it up. But
he escaped my mind.
Another good cameo I thought was Corey Feldman.
Yep.
In the vampire episode, because he's the Lost Boys and all that. That was a good one, I thought. And
don't worry, Cal. That shows.
No, I know. Yeah, I know it's coming later, but I just thought for a cameo, that was a good one.
T had mentioned in the chat earlier something about it would be cool if Anthony Michael Hall was in this, and Anthony Michael Hall, of course, played a character, the Chief Trout, on the show for several episodes, and there's a ton, especially in the later seasons of Psych. They were really good about every episode or so having a huge cameo. Bruce Campbell was in an episode. Yep. Trying to think. Christy Swanson in
Gary Ryan.
The Miz.
Big Show.
I mean they got a lot of guests. They had the Starsky and Hutch type episode. They had Carl Weathers.
Yes.
And I can't remember his partner. But
the other guy who plays everything, he's like the guy from Coach, right? And he's also in 24.
Not T. Nelson.
Not T. Nelson, another one. But also, I know you mentioned Billy Zane, but Billy Zane was a great one because like you said, they mentioned him all throughout the show too, and to have him in the finale was great.
Yep. Oh, I remember when the finale and doing all those interviews and press, and why I dropped that is because I believe Billy Zane said I only showed up because someone said hey, the show wants you, and they've talked about you more times than we could count.
Christopher Lloyd, Kevin Sorbo.
A
lot of these people were in it.
Yeah. Oh, you know what's a great one? I'm blanking.
I hate when that happens.
Tony, not Tony Hale. No offense, the midget from Bad Santa. Tony Cox.
Yep.
Yeah, he was a good one, and he played himself.
Nice. Yeah. When Ashley brought up George Takei playing a more diva version of George Takei, I love it when shows do that, where they over exaggerate the personality of one of their guest stars playing themselves to just this hyper exaggerated form.
I mean, a really speaking of exaggerated form, and a really great thing about Psych, something I believe they had said was the creators and James Roday was like, after season 1, they were like, we realized as long as there's a murder and we solve it by the end of the episode, we can do anything we want. And that's why some of these episodes are like grounded or the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen. Like in the musical, they talk about Santa Barbara being the murder capital of the world.
Yep.
Which we all know it's really Cabot Cove, Maine.
Guys,
So-
how could we forget Sean Astin? Kimber's in the chat. We'd be remiss if we forget to mention Sean Astin.
Yep.
Oh wait, sorry, was that? Wait, no, wait, never mind. That was Monk. Sorry,
That was Monk.
damn it, I'm confusing my
Your
USA shows.
USA shows.
Your
show.
USA
Yeah.
murder shows.
Yes, sorry, and they're back. There used to be back to back. You know, Psych followed Monk, so
Yeah.
um,
Hey, there's a good monk nod though in the finale.
There is.
yes. Oh, that was so great. I should have put that as my moment too, because we got a guy for that.
Well, when we get to the moments, I think it might be Joe and I. We both have a vague moment about the finale.
Yep.
Okay. Another one was geez, now I'm blanking when I just thought of it. What we talking about before? I said Monk. I had somebody else. I can't remember who it is now. Damn it! It's gonna come up to me like in a few minutes, and I'm gonna scream it out. I don't care who is talking. I'm gonna scream it out when I remember it in a few minutes.
The list is long of good cameos.
Yes.
I was watching, actually just rewatching though. I'd say one that I thought the actor could have been used better. I was watching an episode last night, and it's actually I think it was in Let's Get Harry. It was one of my.
Oh, Larissa Lanik. That's one of
The
them.
werewolf one.
Yeah, the werewolf one. I love that episode. And the guy who plays Biff from Back to the Future is in it briefly.
Okay.
Oh
I
yeah.
believe it's that episode. Henry has his hands on he's doing like hands on a hard body to get a truck, and his arch nemesis is Biff, and he's just so like lowly featured. He's okay, and I thought just because of who he is and Psych being the '80s reference show, it maybe he could have popped in at a different time, but the show's pretty great with utilizing their cameos.
I remember who I was singing out. The guy from Rent, the guy who's actually in Rent, was in the musical episode, playing the so-called villain. And they also had Barreled Boswick. Everyone loves Barreled Boswick. And Michael Rooker from Walking Dead.
Yep.
So he was in he was the guy who the ice cream truck, the one who remember what the episode where Sean gets shot? He was the one who's like talking to him. He's like, "Oh, I got a girl, and like we both have a girl. Let me make my phone call to her and say like whatever." He was the guy who was kind of like sympathizing with Sean. That guy. That was Michael Rooker. So like there's a lot of good ones.
Yeah, and I mean they've used they got every single Breakfast Club member except for Emilio Estevez.
Yep. Because Judd Nelson was in it at 1.2.
Mm-hmm.
And he played a scientist, I think.
Possibly. And another fun one that none of us mentioned, but I would be remiss if not bringing it up. The actor that played Red Foreman.
Oh yes.
Right. That was
his dad's former partner, right?
Or at least
the coworker.
That was a touching episode. I mean,
it was.
It dealt with like dementia.
Yeah,
that episode, and Psych does this thing where like it is a comedy. So people are listening and may have not seen it. Like it is a comedy, but there are moments of dramatic moments in it.
Yep.
Yeah, and we all failed to mention Sybil Shepherd played Sean's mom, and she was great.
Yep.
Peter Weller.
Peter Weller. Sybil Shepherd. I mean, Taxi Driver is one of my favorite movies of all time, and like they
Frank
got
Whaley also. And we can't forget Kurt Fuller, who plays Woody on the show. I mean, he's on, he's a recurring character for the most part, but like I don't think we're ever going to mention him on Get Psyched. But he is a great character. His addition to the show was such a good idea. And his little, he always steals every scene that he's in, I feel.
For the Archer fans out there, he's very much the Krieger of the Psych group.
Cal, speak for yourself. Woody is probably one of the best Psych characters, and I was going to bring him up.
Yeah.
All right, sorry. All right, so I guess we should.
No, I'm just messing with you. But you're right. He added so much to the show, and the instant he came on the screen, as the coroner, he clicked. and the weirdness of his character. And you get these like little nuggets every time he shows up of like who he is, but he's it's the
little things like he talks about, like he sleeps in one of the refrigerator drawers at one point because his wife kicked him out or something, and like he showers in the sink, and it's just he's like a pathetic.
He's so sad.
He's a sad, pathetic character that's also hilarious.
Let me get a urine sample.
He's oh man.
You meant that's a good idea too. That's one of his.
That also that episode with the paranormal committee, like where they're like giving awards, right? Wasn't that one where they had Tom Arnold and Yvette Nicole Brown as well? So they have a lot. It's every episode has like a huge, like not a huge star, but like a great cameo.
I mean,
Nestor Carbonell from Lost. He plays what's his name? The guy the rich guy. The one like remember he's like the episode's called like Sean 2.0.
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. Is
Julia dates him for a while.
Is that like a thing on like these USA shows though? Because I've really only like fully delved in the psych where they just get these like pretty decent recognizable names almost like in every episode.
Yeah, that's pretty common on at least some of their flagship shows, because Monk did that a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Monk having a ton. Monk's the other one.
I would say that Burn Notice does that, but their guest stars are never greater than one of their regular characters in Bruce Campbell.
Yeah.
So,
okay. All right. So, Cal, what is our next topic?
Our next topic, we're starting with, they do a lot of great cameos, but we also do a lot of good pop culture references. So we're going to start off with Ashley here with her top 5 pop culture references.
All right, so my number 5 comes from a season 8 episode called A Nightmare on State Street, in reference to A Nightmare on Elm Street. And it does kind of have a plot element with dreams. Gus is having some problems, having like these really like vivid dreams and are trouble sleeping. And so there's kind of like that element to it as well. But there's a lot of zombie call outs in the opening of the episode. He and Sean are driving somewhere, and then they get invaded by zombies. One of them happens to be the other singer from Tears for Fears. And so it's just a really great little episode.
Can I interject real quick with that episode? It actually was a fan vote. That episode was based off of a poll. They asked, like, hey, what episode would you like to see? And, that people voted on, like, a horror Nightmare on Elm Street episode.
Nice.
So we could have gotten 5 different options of what we could have seen. And I also think the remake of their own episode was also on that vote. Because season 8 was all about the fans.
Yes.
Go on.
And then that's the one where Bruce Campbell has his cameo, and he's the doctor that's treating Gus. My number 4 is Murder. Anyone? Bueller, which is a reference to pretty much every John Hughes movie of the 80s. We have 16 Candles references. We have Breakfast Club references. As you can see from the picture right there at the the end of the episode, it's Sean and Gus's high school reunion, but it's a little late, so it's actually been 13 years since they graduated from high school, not 10. And they graduated in 1995, but the whole show is obsessed with the 80s, so that it's kind of like an 80s themed reunion. And it's just really great to see, like, them in that high school environment and talking to people that they went to high school with. Everybody's had that experience where you haven't seen people in a long time from your high school and you run into them, and just like the awkwardness. But then on top of all of that, there's like a murder that happens and they're trying to solve it. And so like Juliet has to come and try to help them. And Sean's also dealing with girlfriend issues on the other side of things, where I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but the one from She's All That.
Abigail Leiter.
Yes, she plays his girlfriend, but then like Juliet's starting to have feelings for Sean, and it's like a whole triangle kind of situation.
And that drags into like 2 or 3 episodes total, where it's that back and forth. But in general, this is where it started, and it was cute.
Yeah, she stuck around for a little bit. She has I think, an important role in the Ying, in the Ying trilogy, Yin Yang trilogy. So, Psych's good at doing that, like interjecting these characters that you don't know if they'll like stick around, like a guest cameo, like or moment, like you said, Ashley, and then you'll see them pop up later. Like it's a procedural that has pretty good arcs.
Yep.
Speaking of cameos that come back in this episode sucks. We have a lot of vampire movie references. We can see that Sean is dressed up as, I think, like the vampire Lestat from Interview with a Vampire, and Gus is mistaken as Count Chocula, but really he's Blackula. And then Sean's like, nobody remembers what that is, Gus.
I'm straight up iconic.
And this is where we get Christy Swanson's character is introduced. And then also Corey Feldman is in this episode. He plays a bartender at this vampire nightclub, and he won't serve Juliet because she's not dressed up as a vampire. And then she flashes her badge. He's like, okay, cool it, like whatever. Like, I'm just doing this job. Like, I don't even believe in any of this stuff. And of course, Corey Feldman was in
Lost
Boys. So there's a lot of overreaching vampire homages in this episode, and I just love that they had the audacity to say this episode sucks, because not many TV executives would probably let that go to air. But the Psych was, they didn't. I don't think they really cared like too much about what the network thought, and I think the network was supportive of them, but I think they did want them to kind of tone down like all the silliness that was going on.
I think I was expressing you guys a little earlier in a pre-meeting and whatnot of the silliness that the network wanted to tone down, and is all they really their note to them after season 1 that give the interject before of like, if they realize they can be as silly as they want as long as they solve a murder, is in the first season there's a couple scenes where they can't lift the box or something, and it's very like dramatic. It's very like, it's very silly, and like. And they just were like, that's the only thing they said, like, you got to cut that out, but do what you want. But that episode, This Sucks, Gus in it with Sucky is mine.
It's great. Another one, it's more of like a general reference to the plot of The Hangover and maybe not too many specific elements from it. It's been a while since I've seen this episode and The Hangover itself, but it's called Last Night Gus, and they're all at a party and they've all had way too much to drink, and then everybody wakes up in the psych office and they're trying to like piece together what happened in the episode. And it's a really great episode with the way that they construct the narrative. I did like the fact that Psych would take risks with these kind of themed episodes, but it didn't ever feel like the theme was like too much. It still felt like a Psych episode even when they had these themes.
Wasn't this for Lassiter's bachelor party or something?
I can't remember exactly.
No, I just watched it last night.
Okay.
The plot of that episode, because that's actually, I'm spoiler alert, that's also one of my moments, is that they're out just celebrating like I think a case or something. Oh no,
a detective is retiring. Retiring.
And they all just wake up drugged and
just really out. And the whole episode, they're just trying to figure out what happened.
And like, I know Sean, because I just watched last night, so it's pretty fresh in my head. Like, Sean has a great, like, you can't do this, and you used to think a thing, and you're special thing. Like, he can't remember anything, and just the way, like, he plays the scene. And Ashley, I fully agree with you. Like, I think it is a good cultural reference, because like, who would make The Hangover like a Hangover type episode also so fresh after The Hangover? Like, it was a pretty bold thing to do. And I have a moment or two on there, but there's some really standout things in that episode.
And my favorite one, which I guess a lot of people are probably shocked that I didn't put Dual Spires on here, but I knew almost like, at least some other people would probably have that as their favorite episode. But I really enjoy Here's Lassie, which is an homage to mainly The Shining, but also a lot of other horror movies from that era. There's references to Rosemary's Baby. The plot of the episode is Lassiter, one of the detectives, he moves into this new condominium, which is messed up because he discovered it was available because they investigate a murder or like a suicide that happened there.
Yep.
And then as soon as he moves in, all this weird stuff starts happening, very similar to like the psychosis that Jack goes through in The Shining, where he's not sure of like reality and like things are moving around. And there's just like a lot of awesome references to The Shining in particular in this episode. The girl that plays Rose, they call her Rosemary, but it's, reference to Rosemary's Baby. She has a son, and he's, like driving around on the little big wheel through the halls of the place. Lassiter literally like goes crazy and thinks that Gus is trying to poison him and attacks him very similarly to how it happens in The Shining, except he has a sword and not an axe.
Because Lassiter is a Civil War reenactor,
yeah. So he has, these military grade weapons in his house. And it's just, I think it's probably just a really strong episode overall, even again with the dressing of The Shining over it. And it's really interesting to see like how, like, okay, how can we bring some realism to this idea that somebody's going crazy? And you learn that like he's like, it's been a plant, like something's been planted in the apartment to make him have these psychotic episodes.
It's like some sort of gas or something.
Yeah, and it's something is put in the air vent so that it's only affecting him. And you've learned that like this apartment's kind of haunted, where the other residents who have lived in this apartment have also had a similar fate. And just, it's a really strong episode. And when I was trying to pick all of my cultural references and everything in general, I was trying to think of like, what are the ones I can remember without having to rewatch them and look them up? And this is one that's always stuck with me. And I had seen this obviously way before I'd ever seen the actual Shining movie, and just kind of rewatching it recently, I kind of picked up on even more references, kind of like with Dual Spires, where it's like I had seen it before, and then after watching Twin Peaks, you pick up more about it.
Yeah, that's on mine too, Ashley.
Oh,
so.
Sorry, I had to sneeze there for a second. All right, so my top fives, I had some just little reference stuff. In number 5, the episode that we mentioned already about with George Takei, they go to Comic-Con, and that's like episode like 4 or 5. It's a first season episode. It's relatively early on. But they go to Comic-Con, and it has a lot of stuff that was really relevant, especially when the episode came out, people complaining about Comic-Con, that it was becoming too, not political, too corporate, where they're there at the beginning of the superhero boom, talking to the artist who's not a fan of the movie. They even bring up like the nipples on the suit in reference to like one of the Batman movies, making a joke about that. And there's like people from a movie studio handing out flyers, getting people to come see the preview of their new superhero film. And there's just all sorts of little fun references in it. And it's just in general a really fun episode.
Joe, can I ask you about that real quick?
No problem.
There was a sequel to that episode, I'm pretty sure, because I think does Gus still use in that episode the Tap Man?
He doesn't in that one, no. The first
I'm getting my wires.
The first one is when Magic Head makes his first debut.
I'm sorry, you're right. Okay, so continue, because I don't want to go on a tangent about Tap Man.
No, it's fine. It's cool. My next one, my number 4, is a Christmas exchange. This is something they do multiple times in the series, but it's that overall feeling you get when you're exchanging with family and all sorts of stuff. And Sean and his dad have this weird relationship we'll just call it. And it's very indicative of the kind of gift giving some people do. And I don't know, it was just really fun. Their Christmas episodes in general are always a lot of fun. They reference a lot of fun little Christmas things, Christmas miracles. It's all very Christmassy. Yeah. My number 3 is from the episode we've talked about multiple times already, American Duos. In the very end, they do this stage performance that's mixing Tears for Fears and Michael Jackson. It's Shout, but with like all the come-ons, it's now Shimon. And it's just glorious to behold on stage. It's geeky and 80s filled and just a lot of fun. The entire episode for my number 2 coming up, the entire episode, Mr. Yin presents, I think, or Mr. Yang, whichever one is Mr. Yin presents, is full of Hitchcock references. But one of the most jarring ones to me is when the character Mary Lightly dies. He's going up the stairs like a character in Psycho, and he gets shoved down and falls and dies and such. So,
and I keep interjecting with these little fun facts.
No, that's cool.
The Jimmy Simpson.
Yep.
Yeah, that is actually James Roday's like good friend from like early, like from when they were young or young, maybe like acting. That's just a buddy of his. That's why he shows up.
Some other notable roles that actor plays is he's one of the McPoyle brothers in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And he plays, I can't remember the character's name, but he's in Westworld as one of the main characters.
Yeah, you'll recognize his face. He also is in another Psych plug or Psych style plug. He's in James Roday's directorial debut. It's a movie called Gravy, and it's a comedy horror about cannibals, and it's all right. But James Roday and Dule Hill pop up if you are that big of a Psych fan. It is a nice, like, yeah, on screen. But anyway, I'm sorry. Continue, Joe. That I would just want to say, like,
no problem. And then anything. My number 1 is any reference from the Twin Peaks. Any sort of reference from it, because there's just, it's chock full of. I think there's like 160 something Twin Peaks references in that episode.
In Dual Spires.
Yeah, in the Dual Spires episode. And it ranges from big ones to all the little small here and there references. But yeah, it's a fantastic episode, chock full of pop culture references. And if you are a Twin Peaks fan, then you should definitely check that episode out. Even if you've never seen Psych, that episode stands alone as a really fun one to watch. So.
So Joe Chandango is going to go into his top 5 cultural references.
It is me. Cultural references. I'm sorry. I believe when I do my list, I got my wires crossed with happy endings. So I'm just going to skip that and talk about that in moments. My bad, guys. But Tears for Fears, there's so many Tears for Fears references. James Roday is a huge fan of 80s music, and especially that style of music, and Kurt Smith pops up in a couple episodes, and I really love Tears for Fears. And this could easily go into cameos also, but I love when they pop up. And when Kurt Smith pops up and actually becomes canon, and he dies in the one episode that Ashley was talking about earlier, it's a riot. So I love when the Tears for Fears get referenced. Here's Lassie, the Shining episode is just a really great episode, and there's Ashley kind of talked a lot about it. There's a lot of little Easter eggs and references to horror movies and Kubrick and The Shining. I'm also a huge Rosemary's Baby fan, so the neighbor being called Rosemary, and like you were saying, like if you see it, like she's dressed like Mia Farrow also, and it's a weird word to use for it, but it's a very like charming episode with the horror and the way they nod. And I am also just a big fan of how I'm a big fan of Lassie episodes.
Yep.
When he gets to shine, because Timothy Osmond plays him so well. My next one also is another Ashley one. It would just be my number 2 is The Hangover. I love that episode. And there is a lot of weird hangover references where they don't remember the night. And Psych does a really good thing of doing homage episodes, because I could easily put in that number 2 spot. They did an episode. I'll put it for number 5 and I'll talk about it for number 2. They did a Friday the 13th themed episode called Tuesday the 17th. And you know, it's about, they go to this camp and they got to solve why it's going wrong, and then a murder happens. It's a really special episode. And my number 1 cultural reference is the Mentalist shade. Because if you know anything, it's that the Mentalist basically came in, copied the idea of Psych, and they got all this critical acclaim, and the writers and creators were salty about it. So they throw so much shade at the Mentalists throughout the season, and then they kind of like correct themselves, and it gets me every time, especially when you know that background. And those are my cultural references that I absolutely love. And I also Sans is Twin Peak ones, because I don't understand it. Also, Ashley and Joe reference.
Oh, we'll get to that in a second.
Before we move on, I did have a question. Was it really a case of like the Mentalist copied them, or was it one of those things where
they're really close?
Where it's like so many times movies will come out or shows will come out that have a similar premise. And it's just, you know, the sign of the times. We're like, hey, this would be a good idea for a show, like with like Dante. Was it Dante's Peak or
Volcanoes?
Armageddon and Deep Impact.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Was it really more of that situation, or was it genuinely they're like, hey, let's do this, but more serious-ish? And
I would say more the first one, of just like, oh, it's a good idea, and like we have another idea, so as much, but Psych and the creators of Psych, I would say in a loving way, treated it though as you copied us. And for me, I think this episode premiered before even The Mentalist. You got to fact check me on it though. Is Psy vs. Psy, the Psych vs. Psych episode, and the character of Declan, who goes as Juliet's boyfriend, is very similar to like the actual Mentalist.
That's Sean 2.0. Psy vs. Psy is when he faces the girl.
Oh, okay.
Girl from the FBI.
Yeah, sorry. But you know what I mean. So like, but every time they, I don't like the Mentalist, but I knew it was bigly acclaimed for a minute. Psych's just a better show, hence why we're here.
So, for my cultural references, for number 5, I had to go with Harry Potter, because I'm a huge Harry Potter fan. And when Gus when they go to England, because this is part 3 of the story arc of Pierre Despereaux, and they go to England, and Sean poses as like a getaway driver, because that guy looks just like Sean, like very similar to Sean. So the Interpol captures the real criminal, and they have Sean pose as him. and bless you, one of the people who is supposed to be part of the crew gets eliminated, so they need to bring another person in. So Sean's like, "Oh, I have my friend here, the Wiz," and like it's Gus trying to go to PotterCon or whatever it is, and he dresses up as a wizard, and he's like, "I don't know how to do magic." He's like, he's supposed to be an explosive a specialist. So at one point he goes, "Expecto Patronum," and throws like dust on the ground, and like it's one of those like popping dust that goes, it makes smoke, and like that's it. But then like 5 seconds later, some other explosion goes off like 20 feet away. That was great to see. That was awesome. Like, it was so funny. And speaking of Pierre Despereaux, in episode 2 of his story arc, we had another cameo from Madchen Amik. I don't know how to say her name properly, but Madchen Amik, who's one of my favorite characters from Twin Peaks, who plays Shelley Johnson. She played the bad guy in that episode of the second Pierre Despereaux. For number 4, I had the Hitchcock references that Joe, I think, mentioned earlier, and maybe Ashley as well. In the Mr. Yin or Yang episode. They had like the Rear Window, the Vertigo, the Psycho, all these different references to it. So North by Northwest as well. All these great Hitchcock references in that one episode, and they had a few in the one prior to it too, but that was great. And then my number 3 is what Joe Chanego just said, was the Friday the 13th cultural reference that they did on Tuesday the 17th. Because, fun fact, when that episode aired, it was on Tuesday the 17th. That's why it was called Tuesday the 17th. So that's why it was cool. And it was like, yeah, they went to a summer camp, and like there's a killer that was stalking him, and there's a whole backstory behind that, but we don't want to get spoiled for you guys. Number 2 is actually the 100th episode, I think, of Psych. And that was a Clue episode. And they did just like the movie Clue, and at the end they had several different endings and all that. But it could have happened this way. But it could have happened this way. But it could happen this way. And that was fun to see.
I'm gonna go home and make love to my wife.
And they had like Christopher Lloyd in that, and like, you know, a bunch of other ones cameos. So that was a good episode. And then obviously number 1, near and dear to our hearts, a bunch of our hearts, 3 of the 4 people here, Twin Peaks. So the Twin Peaks, the Dual Spires episode, like Joe said, I did like, and I remember when if you want to check out the Odd Shape channel episode of the Dual Spires recap they did, I think Ashley mentions in that episode, there's like about 200 something references, right, in that in that like 100-minute episode. There's like 200.
We're trying to write them all down because I don't think there's a collection of those references anywhere.
But just in that last scene alone, there's like 50, right? In that last cutout, the outro scene
has dozens.
Well, and then they combine 2 or 3 references together. Like the mascot for the town that year was Leo the Cinnamon Owl, and the show has a lot to do with weird owls and a terrible character named Leo. So,
the owls are not what they seem.
Yeah, guys, hold me to it. I'll watch Twin Peaks at some point in my life.
And now you got 3 seasons to watch. So.
Yeah. And then just a little fact check correction. The Friday the 13th episode actually aired on Friday the 13th. And, of course, Tuesday the 17th is the following Tuesday. Because Psych aired on Fridays.
Oh, for me, it aired on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
So it's still in there. No, who knows?
No, because like that's why it was called Tuesday the 17th, because it aired on that day for me. I remember that.
I don't know.
When I looked it up earlier, they had mentioned that it aired on Friday the 13th, and then Tuesday the 17th, of course, always is the following Tuesday.
Yeah.
Because there's actually a movie called Tuesday the 17th. It's like a parody of horror.
Oh, no. The reason why I think it was called is because, like, at least for me, it broadcasted on Tuesdays. That's why they called it Tuesday the 17th. I don't know.
Well,
we just looked it up, so.
All right, I don't know.
Tuesday the 17th, though, has... I'd say it's one of their mysteries and cases where you didn't know who the murderer is at first, also. To add to the non-argument.
And it was kind of like that movie April Fool's Day, I think, too. So,
yeah, it's a fun episode, guys. And it also the killer isn't the killer dressed up like the non-popular version of Jason too?
I think so.
Yeah, with a cloth sack on his head from Friday the 13th Part 2.
Yes. Okay.
Our next segment is our top 5 moments. So these are pretty big. So I'm gonna kick this off. So top 5 moments throughout, not episodes, but just moments alone. And for me, number 5 was the close talking part, and I think I forgot what episode it was, but like it looks like when they first show the scene of Juliet and Sean, because there's like an ongoing budding romance between them, but they never want to mix business with pleasure. So like she never wants to date him really. And there's an episode. So what we see from the back, I think you see from the back of Juliet's head, you see it looks like Sean's kissing her, but as the camera pans around, he's just really close to her, talking to her. And it's a really sweet moment. And then she goes, "Is that anything else you want to say?" And he goes, and when he says, he purses his lips and it actually touches Juliet's lips. And it's a really cute scene. And I loved it. My number 4 moment is when Gus wants to go tanning. So they're trying to get into a tanning salon to find like clues.
Yeah.
And Gus is like, "I'm here for my tanning appointment." And Gus, being an African American, they're like, "Wait." He's like, "Wait, what do you mean, you?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm here. What's wrong with that?" And like that was just a really funny moment. I laughed out really loud for that moment. My number 3 is from the D's Nuts episode when Lasser's marrying Marlo. and Juliet is wearing Sean's coat, and she reaches into his pocket and she feels tickets, and she finds out that Sean has been faking this entire time, that he's not really a psychic. Because the whole show, the premise of the show is that Sean's a psychic, but he's really hyper attuned to things, and he picks up little small clues of everything. And Juliet finds out, and she splashes, like, I think, a Prosecco in his face. And you see Gus, who's on the phone away from the scene, see what happened, and he just like hangs up with his girlfriend. He's like, I gotta go, because he knows Sean's in trouble. Oh crap! I hope like someone else mentioned this other moment. If not, I'm gonna bring it up at the end of the discussion. But it's the other moment with Gus between Sean and Juliet when they go to the resort. I hope one of you guys mentioned that. I'm not sure, but the Nintendo DS moment.
Yeah, I didn't mention that, but
I hope one of you guys mentioned that. If not, I'll bring it up in the discussion at the end.
Cal, just talk about it now. No one had that.
No one did. So another moment is when Gus. So Sean uses Gus, I think, credit card to book a romantic getaway with Juliet. And at the end, their room gets robbed by another great cameo, Jason Priestley, and his girlfriend. And the one thing he cares about is Nintendo DS, which is a little handheld video game system. And I'm like, why do you care about that so much? And at the end of the episode, the hotel clerk goes, "Oh, I found the DS," and Gus is like, "Well, that's mine because I basically paid for the room." But he hears a shaking in it, and when he opens it, it's an engagement ring because Sean was going to propose to Juliet, and that was a great moment too. And I forgot about putting that in here. But there's so many great moments I couldn't do it. I think number 2 is on a lot of our lists because it's such another laugh out loud moment. It's from the Dual Spires episode when Gus is like, I think that I might be the only black person they've ever seen. And he goes, that can't be true. And some girl rides up to him in his bicycle and she goes, "Hey, mister, are you Frederick Douglass?" And like, I just laughed so loud when she asked that because that was such a great moment for like, because I guess that is the first African-American person they've seen.
It's not just that too. Gus's response is just like, "Sean, we need to get out of here now."
Yeah.
And I bet if you told Donald Trump that's Frederick Douglass, he probably would have believed it because he still thinks Frederick Douglass is alive.
He's doing great things.
And then the final moment
doesn't like outsiders, so it's
very very appropriate. My number 1 moment is the first kiss that Sean and Juliet share. Juliet's about to go away on vacation with Declan, who just bought a hotel so they can go to like somewhere in Italy, I guess it is. But Sean's like trying to be a man about it and say like, go have a good time. But he has this really good and touching speech. He's like, one of the things he says that I always like, if I ever make a graduation speech, if I ever graduate, would be like, when you go somewhere, capture the moments. Like, take pictures of the moments, not of sights, not of people, not of whatever food. Capture the moment, because that's what you got to keep here. He points to his head, and then he points to his heart, and that really touches Juliet, and she just crushes. She jumps him, and kisses him, and that was their first ever kiss, and that was such a great moment for me. I fell in love. I always wanted everyone, whoever was a Sean and Juliet shipper, it climaxed right there, and that was such a great scene. And then when it ends, like Declan comes down, not knowing what happened. And he's like, "Are we ready to go?" And like, she's like, "Yeah, we're going," and like all that. And it was such a great scene. It really touched me, and I liked it. So we'll go to Josie before I start crying.
All right. So my top moments are number 5 is it goes back to last night. Gus is Woody and Lassie spoon. Now, it's a very small moment. But knowing who Lassiter is and who Woody is it's really funny. It's this moment of like them waking up blacked out and being like, "Wait, what? All right," and it happens like, and then they just reference throughout the episode, and it cracks me up. I think it's so funny. My number 4 is also Cal. Juliet finds out because the episode of These Nups is it's this really like fun episode. Actually, my number 4 and number 3 moments are both from These Nups, and it's this really fun episode where the characters like go on this case, but this wedding, and it's Lassie's wedding, and it's a real, like, I'm repeating myself, and then all of a sudden, like, you get to the end of this episode, and something that you don't think is going to happen happens, and that's why I think it's so memorable. Like Juliet finds these tickets and realizes, wait, he didn't solve the case by being psychic. He just knew the guy went to this concert. And I just remember watching it and being like, that
was unexpected. That we all knew was going to happen at some point, but you're not sure when it's going to happen and all that other junk.
But not there in such like a fun and touching episode at the same time. Like they're in love, and she's like, "Go get me prosecco," you know, all this stuff. And then I just remember like actually like one of the few shows like waiting for the next episode just because I want to see how they handled it.
Yep.
And I mean, like personally, like as much as I love the show, like I wish there was an episode where they more like had it out and like you know, resolve the issue and like more talked about it, but it is what it is.
The episode right after that one is the sliding doors homage, where it's like, well, it could have gone this way, or it could have gone that way, and like the different like plots of like what could the reaction and the fallout of the episode be.
Yeah, and that's a really good episode. It's a really good episode. So my number 3 is coincidentally from these numps, and I'm just gonna quote it here. So we mentioned her earlier. Chief Vic, who's very conservative and whatnot, goes out on Marlowe's bachelorette party with the girls, and Marlowe went to prison. So one of her prison mates, I believe her name is Big Wendy, shows up, and you know, she's like, everyone's like, let's do this, let's party and this. And Chief Vic kind of goes like, I can't do that. I'm the chief of police. Big Wendy goes, I'm the chief of making bitches do shots. And it was so funny. I mean, the actress who played her stole that episode for me, regardless of that ending. Like, it's one of my favorite moments. It's so funny. It's a little moment. And number 2 is Sean proposes to Juliet in the finale. Personally, I think Psych has one of the best finales of all time. It's never going to make any major list, guys. I'm sorry to break it to you, but it does. It has a great finale. And when Sean proposed to Juliet and he races down to San Francisco, I don't know, it was just this like really like heartwarming Sean type proposal that you were waiting for the entire series, and I'm actually glad they ended on this. And I love the inclusion of Gus in the proposal of we're going to share a swimming pool in the backyard and that he's going to be there. It was just the way I thought the show should have ended, that I didn't know the show should have ended that way. Number 1. Excuse me?
Remember? They're like the guy who just takes the ring. He's like, who takes it? He doesn't even chase him right away. He's like, who steals a ring? And then he chases him. Like,
yeah. And then it ended with just this like, well, another case.
And I think it ends on a Oingo Boingo song too, or like if it's not Oingo Boingo, it's Danny Elfman. I think the finale is probably one of the stronger finales in the history of the
USA stuff,
or is any kind of finale, because season 8 was definitely not my favorite. You know, even despite its like short run, I just remember being like frustrated a lot watching those episodes on the initial run, but that finale sold it for me, and I thought it was a very satisfying ending.
Yeah, definitely. And I fully agree. And my number 1 is it's just a great moment and it's unexpected, is Lassie tap dancing with the kids. Now, to give you a little background on the episode, is Lassiter can't focus on this case. And Gus is like, well, I tap dance, and he'll tap dance. And that's kind of how, in real life, and that's how tap dancing gets included in psych lore. And Lassie starts tap dancing to, it was to hone his anger management and like focus. But he realizes, I'm able to focus on this case. And the episode ends. It's like a cold ending with Casey Saab, and he's at a show recital with little kids, the students, because he was in a beginner's tap dancing class, and he's tap dancing, and the kids are tap dancing around him, and it's a funny image. And then he just goes, I forget the name of the murder. He goes, "Oh, I know who the blank blank killer is." And it's like I said earlier, I love Lassiter moments, and it's probably my favorite moment of the whole series, and I'm sure I could think of 20 others, especially when I'm watching it. But yeah, that's it.
All right, so mine, I have a few that like happen a few times over and such, but number 5 is Gus sympathy crying. This happens twice in Dual Spires, because for those that watch Twin Peaks, there's a lot of crying in Twin Peaks. And other times of the episode, like the Dual Spires episode is the one that comes to mind the most clearly, but I know it happens a lot in the series, like at least once a season, that Gus sympathy cries with somebody crying around him. And other times when, like in the very first episode, they come across a dead body and Gus just runs off screaming. But the trope later on is he just like, he can't hold it in. He always gets like this, oh, I'm about to throw up face whenever they're around dead bodies or terrible wounds or whatever. And it's great. That was my number 4. My number 3 is when Sean and Jules first meet. And it's like this fun little like back and forth in a restaurant, and I don't want to spoil what's going on in case you watch the show, because it's the second episode. Happens pretty quickly when you see it, but it's really fun. Number 2, which I think is like literally the same episode, maybe the next one after the third episode, when they're trying to infiltrate a wedding and get clues on what's going on when there was a ring that got stolen and eventually a murder. Sean convinces the guy behind the counter, the concierge, that he's with Interpol, and it's just absolutely hilarious. It culminates with them like running up a massive room service bill on Lassiter's room in the hotel, and both the concierge and like one of the bellhops basically lying for Sean, like, no, he's not. That's not the guy I saw. So it's great for my number 2 there. And then my number 1 is also the Frederick Douglass scene, because like Gus's response, like Gus is at first saying like, I'm uncomfortable. I think I'm like the first black person they've ever seen in their lives. And that little girl asks him, "Are you Frederick Douglass?" He's like, "See, we need to go now."
It's a good scene.
It is.
Which is all right. So all of my moments are not poignant at all. My number 5 is from season 1, episode 9, Lives, in which Sean keeps carrying around this cat that they meet at the crime scene. He keeps calling it the little boy cat, and like Gus is jealous of it. And the plot of the episode is like all these murders keep happening, and the stress hotline gets kind of roped into it. And one of the workers there is your stereotypical goth,
TV goth,
yeah,
dude.
TV goth guy. And like he's real suspicious looking, because when he's talking to one of the callers, it seems like he's almost egging on their stress, and like not helpful at all. And like loud death metal music is played at the crime scene, so Lassiter just assumes that like you have to be the killer and you must be listening to this music, and so he pulls the plug on the guy's radio or his music, and then just like these show tunes start playing, and it's just a hilarious reveal of that subverting of your expectations. You see this gruff looking guy who like most people would be like afraid of, because they, you know, unfortunately, that has a negative connotation in the wider culture, but we all know that, you know, that's not true. And just the fact that, like, yeah, I love show tunes. That's all I listen to. Like, I use the information I get from these helplines to help me write my poetry. So it's just like a hilarious moment of Lassiter always assuming something's right and then being dead wrong, which happens a lot in the series because he's definitely more of the straight-laced kind of character. My number 4 is from the season finale of the first season, Scary Sherry, Bianca's Toast. and where a sorority house, one of the pledges ends up like in an accidental death situation, and then now they think that her ghost is haunting them, and something happens while Sean and Gus are investigating, and like all these sorority girls are just sitting there like, oh no, like something bad happened. And Juliet's undercover, and Juliet's like, where'd Sean and Gus go? And then it cuts to a scene of them screaming and freaking out, trying to get into the car. And like Sean is jumping up and down, and Gus is trying to find the keys. And it's just hilarious that they would be so frightened by, this whole ghost situation.
I'll be honest, that is actually, that has some generally creepy moments in that episode, though.
Yeah,
it's not included, I know, on anyone else's list here. That's a great episode.
Yeah, I love the reveal in that episode as well, because like the one thing that we haven't talked about is that almost every episode opens with young Sean and Gus, and usually Sean's dad in the past, and it's always whatever like lesson that Sean's dad's trying to impart on him in the past is something that also it plays thematically into the episode. And there's like a really cool reveal with this whole rumor of this scary Sherry who like jumped from like the asylum window. So it's a really cool moment. Of course, I also had Lassie's tap dancing with the kid just because of juxtaposition that he's in the same class with these kids. And I had forgotten about the whole like, oh, I figured the case out.
Okay.
My second most favorite moment is from the second episode called Spelling Bee, where the Spelling Bee caller has been murdered and they're trying to figure out what happened. And so Sean and Gus have snuck up to where the Spelling Bee caller is sitting, and people haven't realized what's happened yet. And so Sean just pretends to be the person, or like I think like the new Spelling Bee caller, they like locked him up or something,
so they could investigate the scene.
So he's reading off of the Spelling Bee caller's grocery list, and they're like in the third round, and of course Spelling Bee words are difficult, and he's reading things like banana, and the kids are freaking out. They're like, banana? Yes, banana. Can you give me a definition? It's a yellow fruit. In a sentence, and then like the other words are like onion, and the kids, just the look on their faces. And then my absolute favorite part of that moment is he reads off Mitchum, like Mitchum deodorant, and Gus realizes he's reading from the grocery list, and Gus used to be in the Spelling Bee, and he actually got eliminated, and he was like one away from being the winner. So Spelling Bees are very important to him, and the fact that Sean is like sullying the good name of the spelling of the bee is hilarious. It's hilarious, and
great episode.
You get a lot of stuff right about like the Spelling Bee culture, and like when the kids are constantly quizzed. It's a great episode. And of course, Frederick Douglass is my number one because it's just so messed up. In Joel Spires, they don't get a lot of outsiders, and yeah.
And the pacing of that scene is just so perfect. Gus is like, "This is my concern." Girl says thing. Gus is like, "See, we need to go."
So that brings us to our final top 5. We're going to have Ashley kick off our top 5 episodes of the 8 seasons of Psych. And this is pretty hard to do, but we managed to do it.
Yeah, this is definitely challenging. I kind of did my list several times. But, of course, my number 5 is one I already talked about with Here's Lassie. Just because out of, all the years, that episode has stuck with me. My number 4 is Mr. Yin Presents, which is the Hitchcock homage. It's the second in the Yin trilogy, or the Yin and Yang trilogy. Brilliant use of all of the characters coming together and the plot. I think it's just a really strong episode, and I think it's on some other people's lists, so I'll leave it at that. My number 3 is from season 2, Lights, Camera, Homicidio. which we had mentioned before that James Roday is Hispanic. His name is James Rodriguez. And so in this episode, there's a crime committed on the set of a very popular Santa Barbara telenovela, which I can't remember the name of the telenovela off the top of my head. And Sean goes undercover as an actor on the show, and like I don't think like Roday is fluent in Spanish, but like he knows enough to get by, I guess. But like the way he's talking on this show is so bad. And like,
don't forget that Sean's dad Henry watches that show.
Oh, it's Sleeping the Nation.
Yes, and like apparently everybody in Santa Barbara watches this show. I think even Juliet watched one episode.
Gus is a huge
fan because it's on every doctor's office TV, and he's a pharmaceutical rep, so he's often in and out of those things. But just like Sean's character is like this UPS guy, and the way they have him made up, it's just so ridiculous looking.
Ashley, I have the name of the episode.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. Telenovela Explosión Gigantica de Romance.
Wow. And then if you're familiar with like telenovelas, they're a very big deal in like Latin America and
pretty big deal here.
Yeah, like I know like all like the telenovelas. Like I'm a teacher, and like the kids will talk about them at school, and it's like it's just very over dramatic acting, and like it just has a very like certain like a style, and this really mimics the style so well. And I think this is the first episode that James Roday directed as well. And it's hilarious. I love it.
It was not directed by James Roday. I have that right up here. No, we were talking about it earlier, though. We all were like, he directed it.
Yeah.
It's not.
He's just so awesome. We just assume he did everything.
Mm-hmm. He's talented.
My second favorite episode is the first Christmas episode. Gus's dad may have killed an old guy, where we get to meet Gus's parents, who are played by Ernie Hudson and Felicia Rashad, which we mentioned before. And Gus's family is not a big fan of Sean because Sean is seen as a bad influence on him. And so Sean keeps trying to like make himself look good. Excuse me. And it doesn't go really well for him. Sorry. And they're like going caroling, and they discover this old guy has died, and then there's like foul play is afoot, and Gus's dad's accused, and then his mom, and there's like all sorts of like shenanigans all centered around Christmas time. And this episode has a really good B plot with Juliet and Lassiter as well. Juliet's family has all of these wonderful like Christmas traditions, and because Lassiter, especially in the early seasons, is like a loner, she feels bad for him and invites him over, and then he ends up like ruining everything, and eventually like she just kind of says like you're not welcome anymore, but like in a polite way, and then he kind of plays it off as like, oh yeah, I can't upstage Auntie Juliet, I get it, in his very like arrogant way that he is.
Yeah.
And of course, my number one all time, even though it didn't make it in my top moments, is just Joel Spires in general. Even before I knew what Twin Peaks was, I just loved this episode. I didn't get all the references, but it stands alone, or it stands on its own as just a really good psych episode. But just all of the care that is taken to make this to be something that honors the Twin Peaks show.
Yep.
James Roday is a huge fan of Twin Peaks, and so he's actually friends with one of the actors that played Bobby, Dana Ashbrook, and
who plays Bob in this episode.
Yes, and so he kind of got him on board to help get all the other people on board, because anytime you're doing something where it's a comedy show, it's like, oh, are they going to be making fun of us? It's like, no, it's going to be a very loving homage.
Like there will be some comedy and humor, but it's the comedy and humor that like everyone
doesn't. This seem like a show though, in like retrospect, that like David Lynch would pop up in.
Like
Do you know what I mean?
making an actual appearance? Oh, you mean
like him, like making an appearance, like he was a cameo as like a guy who worked at a gas station, like a very David Lynch thing to do.
I
Like
don't
I feel
know.
like
It's hard to say. It's really hard to say considering he plays a regular character on the Cleveland show.
that's what I mean. Like he pops up in these weird but normal things.
Yeah,
Like the Cleveland show.
he's the owner of the bar in the Cleveland show.
Oh, okay. There's I'm drawing a blank here, but there's another thing where he just pops up in, and like I just feel like Psych would be one of those things he could just
Probably.
show. Sorry to cut you off again.
No. You have more?
No, that was it.
Okay. All right, so we're to my number 5 episodes, my top 5. My number 5 is This Episode Sucks. And not only is it just a hilarious premise for the episode, but the cultural references, the costumes, the jokes about all the tropes and ideas, it's one of my favorite for that reason. Number 4, Romeo and Juliet and Juliet. The title alone is hilarious, but I love the every like crime show does it where they try to delve into the deep underbelly of generic crime organization X, and this one does it pretty well. I also really enjoy the scene of Sean going to martial arts school like he has here.
Wait, let's not forget. Let's not forget the. Remember their assistant that he fired. Like
Yep.
they used the assistant, and he's like, "Oh, come speak like Chinese to him." He's like, "I only know like 3 words of Chinese," and like
Yep.
that was hilarious too.
Number 3, Murder, Anyone, Bueller, is one that we've talked about already, but all the constant references, Gus. There's one really cringy moment in this episode that I absolutely love, and it's when Gus set up the slideshow of like their graduating class's yearbook, but it's all pictures of Gus. It's like stuff Gus was involved in, and at the end of the slideshow, it's like, "Yeah, all right, everyone." Everyone's just kind of like. Then my number 2 is The Old and the Restless. It's one of the first episodes Sean's dad really gets involved in stuff, and it's absolutely hilarious as a Talmadge McGooliger.
Which sounds like a fake name, but it's not.
And there's just lots of little stuff like the fun realization when Sean realizes like you actually enjoy being here, pretending to be this 70-year-old man in a retirement home where people will hand feed you sandwiches and you like all the ladies love you and all sorts of stuff. It's a fun, quirky, weird episode. It's got one of the guys from I think Revenge of the Nerds.
Yeah, Booger, the guy who played Booger.
Who also I think is in Supernatural.
Yeah.
And the last scene as they're making a break for it to get out of here because the actual Talmadge McGooliger has shown up, which what kind of name is that? But that they get out of there. It's this we talked about previously that there's lots of references like, you know, The Shining and other fun movies and stuff like that. Well, at the very end, it zooms in on this photo that I've used as my picture here for it of like all the people at the home, and there's Sean's dad front and center, like he always belonged there.
You've always been here.
And then kind of reminds me of the Shining picture.
What's up?
Kind of reminds me of the ending Shining.
Yeah, that's the entire thing I got from it.
Okay.
But the number 1 episode for me, much like Ashley's, is Dual Spires. It's just this fun, weird. They constantly make jokes about how it's a town on the map that's in parentheses. They only get cell phone in like a 1-foot square area of the entire city. Nobody has the internet there. And this was in the mid to early 2000s, or this was like 2011 almost.
They should have.
And it's one of those situations where it's like, wow, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
All right, Joe, Chenango.
Oh yeah. All right. So my top 5 episodes. So there's a theme in my top 5 episodes where I picked like ones I like just enjoy and rewatch. Like because there's some I could like before I start. There's some I could throw in there that I'm like that deserves to be in a top 5. They'd probably be in a top 10 then, I guess. So my number 5 episode is Bollywood Homicide. It's one of the few episodes that features a different theme song, but it's an episode celebrating Bollywood films, and Sean and Gus are to protect someone from preventing to get murdered. But there is a murder. There's always a murder, guys.
Yeah, it's the nature of the show.
And it's this like really like fun, unique episode where the you know, like usually are close to the villain and we don't know it. And I think all the characters they write are in the episode are very strong. I'm not gonna pronounce his name.
I was going to say there's two great cameos. One by Jay Chandrasekhar.
Okay, that's how you say his name.
From Super Troopers, and the other cameo Sendil Ramamurthy, and he's from Heroes.
Okay, so I didn't know the second one. The first one though, and I believe he directed quite a few episodes. Also, like he's a big director on shows. But it's just an episode I watch like so much, and it's so much fun. I think the intro, like Psych does this thing, like, especially when they're different cultures, where they do different intros in the language or in the style, and it pulls you into the episode. And Bollywood Homicide is it's 5 for me, but it's up there. So my number 4 episode is Last Night Gus, and we talked about it. That's the Hangover theme episode. Once again, I find that episode so much fun, and I love the references in that episode. And I love just how everyone kind of doesn't get to play their character in the episode. You have Lasseter like really going off the book in that episode, like because he lost his car, he doesn't know what's going on, but there's an investigation going on because someone woke up dead, and Lasseter also thinks he may have killed him with his own gun, and he's very nervous. So they go to Woody, but Woody was also out with them that night. And they, like I said, which I referenced earlier, they woke up spooning, and Sean can't remember. Gus thinks he's this like playboy, like guy who get any girl how he talks, and it turns out the girl actually was the murderer's daughter, who was a convict, and they're trying to get the phone to delete the guy's photo because it was never been taken. And it's a really, really clever episode. Does it have one of the worst CGI blowing up scenes of people jumping out of? Yes.
That doesn't detract, though.
But USA gave them no budget for a lot of their episodes.
Oh, yeah. You can tell there's a lot of bad CGI in some of the episodes.
Yeah. But it's a great episode. And and there's this really great bit in this episode where they show up to the bar, and they're asking the bartender about, like, have you seen my car and this and that? And then they start going, oh, and there was this guy, was he here? The guy's like, yes, it's my partner. And, it turns out the bartender is a homosexual and is in a relationship with the guy they think's the suspect. And Lasseter doesn't, like, quite get it. And it's just a pretty funny setup in the episode for that. And I like when a Psych goes there with certain things. You don't see that normally. Episode 3 is also Lights, Camera, Homicidio. And that also has a special intro. As I said, I think the special intros really like bring you into the episode and get you feeling about it. But
I'm sorry to interrupt. You're talking about all the special intros. Like Ashley's and mine's number 1 is Dual Spires, and it has a special intro.
Yeah, that
like plays off of the original theme, and I think they even got the singer that did a lot of the stuff too.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that those episodes always stand out to me. I knew the Dual Spirals one had a special intro. I can't believe we haven't mentioned it. And the one thing I said about Lights, Camera, Homicidio, I love how like his character is named Chad for some reason.
Yes.
And there's all these like weird like Blossom jokes because the writer of the telenovela is a white guy from Hollywood who used to write for Blossom. and it's a really funny setup. And there's this that episode is like they're just playing inside baseball the whole episode. It's very self-referential, and Chad does pop up in a couple other episodes. And then my number 2. So there's a theme between 2 and 1. I'm a big fan, if you haven't noticed, of like the supernatural episodes. My number 2 is Let's Get Hairy, and it's the werewolf episode. Spoiler alert, I'm the only one who doesn't have the Joel Spyros episode. It's a top 10. It's a top 10. It's a good episode, but Let's Get Hairy is this episode. It's about a guy comes to them and he's like, you have to lock me up. I'll double your rate. And, I'm going to commit a murder tonight, or I'm going to do something stupid because I'm going to turn into a lichen, a werewolf. And they don't take him seriously. Actually, Lasseter directs them to there. And they're gearing up to like watch a WrestleMania type. And there's this really weird...
Royal Rumble.
Royal Rumble, where they have 2 dolls, like not just dolls, like baby dolls, and they're dressed up in like a choker and like a mullet hair.
I saw Jim Duggan and Junkyard Dog.
Thank you, Cal. And it's a weird thing. It's funny. But then we go on this great adventure, kind of very similar to my number 1 of, is he a werewolf? Isn't he? And there is a bit of skepticism, mystery to it, and it's one I could rewatch over and over and over again. And that leads me to my number 1. Excuse me for my voice; I'm pretty stuffed up and congested today. It's This Episode Sucks, and we already talked about that. This episode sucks to me. It's the vampire episode. It's the one with Corey Feldman we talked about earlier. Is pound for pound my favorite episode. It hits so many comedic moments, but also has a very like sweet storyline of Lasseter. Mm-hmm. And we introduce her Margot, and Margot is also a reference to vampires. It's Chrissy Swanson, who is the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And like usually they don't re-pop up someone like Chrissy Swanson, and she does, and they end up getting married. But that has nothing to. I mean, like you don't know about that in that episode. It's a really at its heart like this really sweet episode, but where Sean and Gus get to be silly. Like Margot and Lassie, they have this thing back and forth about Clint Eastwood and movies, and they ask each other questions. And to me, This Episode Sucks is a pinnacle psych episode. One other thing I'm going to track back really quick before we move on. I want to say about Lights, Camera, Homicido is it also is the first episode I ever showed my girlfriend when I was like, I love psych and you have to watch this show. And I showed her Lights, Camera, Homicido. And so my girlfriend is a really, really big Mets fan. And there's a line in it where Sean compares the lead guy's sister to Keith Hernandez. And it was just this reference that, like, it was just a Sean reference. But my girlfriend was like, I also love this show because they just referenced Keith Hernandez. So
nice.
That's another reason why it's like a little more special to me on 3, and I forgot to mention it. But those are my favorite episodes, and also everyone said already, because I can name like 4 bad episodes of Psych, and they have like 70 episodes. So,
and even with those 4 quote unquote bad episodes, you can find something in that episode that you love.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very special show.
Which brings me to my top 5, which is probably a lot of them have already been mentioned. Number 5 is Late Night Gus, the Hangover episode, and like I know all of us have mentioned it throughout tonight's show. There isn't much more to say about it, but it was just fun to see. Like like the Hangover movie is great, and I think Joe Chenengo was saying earlier, like this was fresh off the movie, and the fact that they nailed it, like, and still keep it like interesting and entertaining. That's what I like about this episode a lot. And it had a lot of Woody in it. Everyone loves Woody, so
Yeah.
And just like everyone throughout it was fun. Like, you see a different side of Lassiter, you see a different side of like Henry. So it was great to see. And he's like, I think then the one that ends later with like Gus, he's like being drugged, right? And like he's like, someone's TV just got messed up, but it's in his apartment. Like, that's so hilarious. Like,
they just shot that dude's TV.
Yeah, it's just hilarious. I just loved it. For my number 4 was D's Nuts, because like it was one of my top moments in this episode when Juliet finds out about Sean. But just this episode alone, like what Chandango was saying earlier about like I'm the was it like the chief of making bitches take shots, and all these other moments throughout this episode were just great. And like Lassiter doesn't really have a best man, but he says like this guy's his best friend since like childhood or whatever, but it's just, or college, but it's just some loser guy that he really, because he didn't really have friends, so you kind of see like a sadder side of him. But like it was just a good episode overall for every character. For number 3, I cheated a little bit into the Yin Yang trilogy, but if I had to pick one of those, it would be the same one that Ashley chose, number 2. A lot of Hitchcock references and just having them assume the roles of like characters from Hitchcock movies in the middle of the episode, and then Marion dying, what Joe Davis said before. And then the end of the end of the episode was like great, because Sean had to choose. Like, I don't know if a lot of you guys saw Dark Knight, but it was just like where Batman had to choose between Rachel and Harvey Dent. Just like this, like he had to choose between his girlfriend Abigail Lydar. Sean had to choose between Abigail Lydar and Juliet. So he sends like, I think, Gus and Lassiter after Juliet, who's on the clock tower, and he went to go save Abigail, and him and his father went to go save Abigail underneath the dock. And he actually sees the bad guy. He sees was it Yang there? Or Yin. He sees Yin, but he can't go after Yin because Abigail's in trouble. So like, there's so many great moments. And then the end of the episode, you see the picture frame. I'm not going to say what's in the picture frame, but you see it ends on like, I think, the picture frame, right, or something like that. So that was the photo, yeah. So and like,
also it has Mary's funeral, and it's kind of touching that like it's Sean and Gus, and I think Mary's mom are the only ones there. But Sean and Gus, like
racquetball,
they racquetball. They dress up because Mary said it's one of his favorite things is racquetball.
Mm-hmm.
So they show up and
tried to get him into racquetball and it didn't take. Or something.
It was something like that.
Well, he wears ankle weights. But no, that episode. There's this really, this moment with Ali Sheedy in that episode where the sitting in the car.
That's the first one.
That's the first one.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Never mind.
No, but a moment I wanted to mention from this episode that when I was rewatching it, it's like, man, why didn't I put this on my list? Was because Lassiter goes to save Juliet, and she's like trying to say, I'm fine, and then she just breaks down crying, and he's comforting her, and that's just really telling of how like their relationship is like growing or changing, where they can be supportive of each other instead of him
just being Lassie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Kyle. Go.
No, I was going to go to number 2. What were you going to say about that?
I was just going to say, piggybacking off of what Ashley was saying, Psych does just this really, really good job of giving intimate, real moments amongst the silliness. Like,
well, and legitimate character growth.
There's character growth in not every episode, but every season. Like, someone grows, and by the end of the show, like, Lassie has the most growth, but so does everyone else. Like, one thing I wish I said earlier was like, Gus starts off so like straight and narrow and penciled, and he gets a little bit of Sean in him by the end of it, and learns to be goofy and silly.
Well, you see that in the finale about like how he's torn about going after Sean and not going after Sean. Like, should I stay with my straight and narrow job with Bud from the Cosby Show, or should I go after Sean? And you see that in the finale. For my number 2, I had High Top Fade Out, which in my opinion, like Chandengo was saying earlier, how each episode had like certain special episodes had their own opening, and whether it was singing the Psych theme song in a different language. This was sung to a cappella, and one of my favorite groups growing up was Boyz II Men, and Boyz II Men did the intro for High Top Fade Out, as well as the next a cappella episode they had later on. And And also it had like I said, it had the cameos by Jaleel White and Kenan Thompson, but you can't forget Tony Todd was also in that episode, and Tony Todd is always like like this figure that like always scares people, but he's like, you know, I don't want to spoil how he is in the episode, but he's also good in that episode as well. But just that intro is what really drew me into the noticing that there's different openings to Psych, and I love that. Even though like Bollywood Homicide did it well as well, this one is my favorite because I love the acapella, and then them singing "It's So Hard to Say Goodbye" at the end of the episode because it's a four type encryption, and they needed 4 people to sing it. And there's also a cameo by the guy from The Shield. He was the guy at the beginning of the episode riding the bicycle messenger. And then finally, who are we kidding? Number 1, like everyone on our list except for Chendango is Welcome to Dual Spires, because all of us, 3 of us, have a fondness for Twin Peaks, and this episode nailed it on every single point. Like, and Ashley was saying before, like over 200 like references to the original show, Twin Peaks. Like, it did the right thing. Like James O'Day, I think we probably mentioned this, was a huge fan of Twin Peaks. So the fact that he got it to happen and get it the way he wanted it was so good. And who doesn't love Sherilyn Fenn?
Yep.
Who doesn't love Cherry?
She's
Cherry
so
what?
Cherry what?
Everything.
Cherry's the best. And
Guess
then
what?
I love it when she's telling them to like be quiet in the library because you're gonna scare the books, and then I'm just kidding.
With you guys.
She was so good throughout of it.
Yeah, her cameo is by far my favorite of Dual Spires, and when she talks about like I love like dancing's my favorite or something that she says where like I could dance all night long, or just all the little nods to her character from Twin Peaks is great.
Well, in that last scene where it's inside the Sawmill Diner and all the weird stuff is happening. There's like 4 people dancing. There's the one
giant guy,
the giant guy asking for 3 cinnamon pies. There's the dude
barking in the window as a
the dude barking through the window.
There was and the best part, like I always talk about on a show Twin Peaks, how I love that guy goes in the actual Twin Peaks show, the guy goes, "I've heard about you," and he always gives a thumbs up. The guy who does like that in Psych, he's like winking and that, and like
even just like
Lasseter goes, what do you want, Jessup, or something like that? Like, or mind your own business, Jessup. Is so funny, like, because that's one of my favorite moments from Twin Peaks. I always say that. I actually got to say that to Kyle MacLachlan in real life. So that was like that whole coming full circle was so great on 2 shows I really love. You know,
I really also love Lasseter's. That's a damn fine cup of cider.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's so many good moments, and Lenny Von Dolan was also another person we forgot to mention in the cameo. He played the guy from Fire Walk with Me, the one that Laura Palmer would read to or something, or read the diary to. He was the sheriff, and like it's funny because like Sheriff Truman from Harry Truman from Twin Peaks, but in here it's Randy. Was it like Sheriff
Andrew Jackson?
Yeah,
Andrew Jackson, and then the son is Randy Jackson, and they have Bob Barker, and like
nobody seems to get that these are cultural references.
Which is funny because this show is a cultural reference that probably a large percentage of the Psych audience didn't get.
Like me.
Yeah. Because I remember watching Twin Peaks when I was a kid, and when I resaw the Psych episode of Dual Spires, I didn't really understand it until I rewatched Twin Peaks again, and I'm like, wow, they really did nail every single, like almost every single thing that like you love. And even the thing we're talking about, Ray Wise's hair changing.
Yes.
Because Leland Palmer's hair changes in the show. Oh, I don't want to give spoilers away, but Leland Palmer's hair changes. So in the beginning of the episode, you see Ray Wise's character, father, I forgot his name,
Wesley,
talking on the phone to Sean, and his hair is like brown. But then when it comes to the end of the episode, his hair is gray, and it's like, what happened to your hair? And like that's just an homage to Twin Peaks, and like, oh man, like on so many levels, that episode was phenomenal.
Yep.
And like,
cool.
So those are top 5s for everything.
Yeah, top 5 for a lot of them. I mean, we had a lot of honorable mentions. I'm sure we could probably done top 5 openings and stuff. There's so many top 5. You can see why we want to do this show. We love Psych.
Can we do it every week?
Yeah, that was 2 hours, man.
if you watch the show, thank you. If you're here with us or watching later, thank you for joining us. And like, if you get to any interest in watching Psych, please watch it. It's a great show. You can see how much passion we have for it. You'd love it. It's a fun show, and there's a lot of pop culture stuff that like we try to touch bases on things that people can relate to.
It's worth the if you got to rent it. I think it's worth the rental, at least for a couple seasons. Like I know Joe and Ashley did.
We ended up buying it for I think it was Cyber Monday. Amazon had a really good deal on it, and it was like $10 a season.
Yeah, sorry. It's a show. I think it's also one of those shows, and this is a lot of shows where once you start watching it, you fall in love with the characters, and you just want to like hang out and like watch them because like an unfortunate thing about Psych in its presentation to a lot of people was it was just procedural, and it's not.
No, it broke a lot of the procedural concepts and ideas because a lot of procedural shows you can figure out what's going on really early, but because of the nature of how everything's given to you in the show, you don't really figure it out until almost they figure it out. I mean, you can sometimes, but in general.
And like once you get to like the characters and like things are going on, the mystery and the detective story of it is secondary. Like it has its episodes that they're there and you're like, all right, it's that, but it really sticks its own, and I'm laughing consistently more episodes than not.
Yep.
And a lot of the characters are also very relatable. Like you really go through their ups and downs with them. And like I know one of the questions we asked on another show, like on Archie panel, actually, the show actually, I think it was like Sidekicks, and Ashley answered like, who would I take a road trip with? And your answer was Sean and Gus because they'd be so fun to hang out with, and I would definitely want to hang out with even if it's Sean and Gus or James Roday and Dule Hill, because I feel like their characters are very indicative of the type of people they are themselves.
Well,
and
Cal, that's how I think Ashley and I started talking in Philly. I think that was the Odd Shape panel right before I met you guys, and she said that was coming on. And I was like, I dropped Sean and Gus or something about that, and she was like, "That's a good idea."
Probably
something like that.
Yeah, so. But I hope because Julia Hill went to the college that I currently go to, I hope he comes back to visit so I can just be like there and take pictures with him and like rub his head and be like, "Oh, it's Magic Head." And,
maybe not do that, Cal. Just
I have to.
You would like it.
Respect.
I'll be like this bump.
Privacy.
Ask him if he's Bud in Cosby Show.
No.
Oh yeah, I'm like, hey, aren't you Bud from the Cosby? That would be great, Joe. If I did that, I'm gonna get a video of it saying, "Hey, aren't you Bud from the Cosby Show?" And then
it's
let's go MC, clap your hands.
It's also one of those shows though that like we've talked about so many references here, and we haven't even mentioned. Come on, son.
Oh yeah.
Like the show's so chock full of everything, and it's seemingly has never seemed to be afraid to touch something.
And it always did well doing it. I don't think it ever stepped its bounds and all that. It was just always fun.
No,
it's one of those rare occurrences too, where it's a show about people dying almost every episode, but it's so kind of lighthearted and humorous about it, and in like a very fun, dark humor kind of way.
All right, if people are still watching, if you haven't watch like 10 episodes, right, and then go watch the musical.
Yes,
and that'll reference just what Joe was just saying.
None of us mentioned the musical. Which is weird. None of us mentioned the musical. It was a good musical.
Yeah, it is a fun episode.
So
because the songs they had were even like a lot of the sayings. Like I've heard it both ways was one of the songs, and like it was crazy.
Santa Barbara is the murder capital of the United States, and
well, what happened? I think is the show did this like big swing. Like what was it, 8 seasons? So I'd say let's say the first 5 seasons. They did their goofiness, but they did their episodes, and all of a sudden they were like, "We're gonna make this for the fans."
Yeah,
and the musical came with the fans, and we're also lucky enough that like the USA let them do what they want to do.
Well, and after season 5, it's kind of they've reached that point where they don't, and it's not because they would receive negative reviews or anything, but they didn't really know how many seasons they had left because how long can a show last? So after season 5, they're like, all right, we've had a fantastic run of just regular form, like our thematic episodes. Let's just have fun from now on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think any interview you watch, there was like, we never knew when it was ending. And there's a reason why, like part 2, we're getting a movie right now.
Yeah.
Right.
I hope the movie's good. I hope we all like it. It gets the viewership because I know they want to keep making them. Because the thing is, Psych's the type of show where like they could come back and make a Christmas special or something every year.
Yep.
It's just that type of show.
So I guess we're gonna wrap things up, and I want to thank Joe Chandango for doing all the graphics you guys saw during out the show. You did a great job, so thank you, Joe. I know you did it from work, and you did a lot, and you were sick, and you still did it for us. So thank you so much. Thank you for having the pineapple as well. So where can we find you, and what have you been up to?
So I'm just gonna shake this pineapple. No, I've been you can find me Chandingo1 on Twitter. That's usually where you could hear annoying, mediocre tweets, whatever you want to call them, sass. I've been sick. I've been just being tired. I hope to start my podcast up again soon. What? You haven't seen that? But I can't make any promises on that end. So just come interact with me. I'm doing well. Love me. I'm just kidding. I'll see you next episode.
I also want.
Thanks, guys. I had a really great time tonight.
I also want to thank our friends at Geek to My Nerd for hosting this episode and sharing the same passion we have for Psych. So where can we find you guys?
First, I want to thank you for getting it right this time, unlike at the beginning of the episode. I know you've heard it both ways, but still. We are Geek to My Nerd. I'm Joe.
And I'm Ashley.
You can see our various Twitters underneath our faces here.
Yeah, so please follow all of our accounts for our lukewarm takes on pop culture.
I like to call them room temperature takes.
And then our Geek to My Nerd, that's where you'll find any of our little riddles that we like to put out there. We do a lot of little giveaways, so follow that to get all the latest updates on everything that we're going to be doing for like BFF, which is a show that we do over at the Tough channel.
Yep.
And
then we also do lots of Let's Plays or live streaming for video games and stuff, which we'll be doing some more of pretty soon. You can find a lot of our adventure game stuff, whether it's ROM 2064 or some of the various Telltale games. And that's.
Yeah.
We have our fingers far from the pulse of community, though.
And don't forget to subscribe to their channel, guys. Right here. Like the button and subscribe. I don't know which side it's going to be on, but it's going to be on one of these sides.
It's around here.
Yeah, so make sure you subscribe to their channel and like it. So thank you again for hosting this. As for me, I'm Pineapple Cal. I just came up with that name today, and I'm glad it works.
I like it.
You can find me on Twitter at VeerangeDejaVu and on the Kingslayer Network on YouTube. So please subscribe to that. I stream every day for Skyrim. It's pretty funny. I'm pretty bad at it, but it's still fun. And you could probably catch us again because I know you enjoyed this. And I know that you can find us again probably December 10th. It's a Sunday night, talking about the Psych movie that's going to come out on December 7th.
Yep.
So until then, embrace the deception and learn how to bend. Because you got to let your inhibitions psych you out at the end. Something like that.
Something like that.
Something along those lines.
So we'll see you then on December 10th, guys. Bye, everybody.
Bye.